We've seen truth tables for conjunction, disjunction, and negation, but what about implication? And this is the topic of this video. So this is the truth table for double implication, the equivalence that we write with this double arrow here. So let's suppose that phi and psi are both true. So phi and psi are our arbitrary formulas. Then phi if and only if, so we write this as a if and only if, so this double f. So phi if and only if psi is true, provided both phi and psi are true. If phi is true but psi is false, then our double implication is going to be false as well. If phi is false and psi is true, our double implication is again going to be false. And if phi is false and psi is false as well, our double implication is going to be true as well. So what this shows is that the statement phi if and only if psi is true whenever the components have the same truth value. They could either both be true, as in this case here, and if they're both true, then the double implication will also be true. They could also be both false, and this is the last case here, and if that's the case, then the double implication is also going to be true. So what matters is that the formulas that are combined by the double implication, the double error, have the same truth value. And this can be truth value true, 1, or truth value false, 0. Let's now consider the table, the truth table for the implication. So this is not the double implication, but it's the simple implication that we have here. So this is the truth table for the implication. And if phi is true and psi is true, then phi implies psi will also be true. However, if psi is true and phi is true and psi is false because it is 0, then the implication will be false. If psi is false and if phi is false, 0, and psi is true, then the implication will also be true. If phi is false and psi is true, and psi is also false, then the implication will again be true. These last two assignments in the truth table might be a little puzzling to you. So for the time being, I think is enough to just register that this is the truth table of the implication. This is just how we define the implication. You might not agree with this, but that's just the definition that we're going to use. Let's look at the truth table for the implication a little more closely. So here we have the truth table, and we see that the only situation in which the implication is false is the second case. So when phi is true but psi is false. And just as a matter of terminology, it's important to say that we call psi the antecedent. So psi is the antecedent of the implication, whereas psi here is the consequent. So what comes before is the antecedent, and what comes after is the consequent. So according to the truth table of the implication that we have here, whenever the antecedent is true, but the consequent is false, then the implication is false. And whenever the antecedent is true and the consequence also true, then the implication is true. Now, if the antecedent is false, as in the last two cases here, then the truth value of the implication will be true regardless of the truth value of the consequent. This is a little puzzling and has to be taken for granted. So this is just how we are going to understand the meaning of implication. And this is called, in technical language, material implication. Now you might ask yourself, does this understanding of the meaning of implication capture what we mean in ordinary language when you use the statement if then? For example, when we say if it rains, the soil gets wet. This seems to be true. Now, according to the truth table that we have here, this statement would be true whenever it does not rain. So if we had a world in which it never rains, then the implication if it rains, the soil gets wet would always be true no matter what, regardless of whether the soil gets wet or not. So it seems that perhaps material implication as we have defined here doesn't capture the meaning of all the if-then statement in natural language, but nevertheless this is how we are going to use the notion of implication in this course.